Now we're going to move to today's perspective, and it is 15 years now since China surpassed the US as Africa's largest trade partner. China's economy continuing to grow as it builds deeper and deeper bridges with African countries. The US, of course, still has many interests in Africa as well, and Russia is also knocking on the African door. Where in the world, then, does it leave European countries amid the turn towards the need for different raw materials amid the Green Revolution and as well the pressure needed to try to ensure that African countries are not just being exploited for providing them? Well, many of those questions tackled in a new report from the think tank, the European Council on Foreign Relations, and its author, Theo Acheampong, who is an economics consultant and political risk analyst and a senior visiting fellow at the Council, joins us now. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. First of all, just tell us how the needs of what countries are seeking in Africa has changed, particularly with the Green Revolution, because countries are after different things, if you like, now, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely, and a pleasure to be here. The different geopolitical underpinnings happening on the African continent. For Europe, historically, had colonial relations with different African countries. Then, as you rightly pointed out, we've had China that had a lot of trade ties and relationship with Africa. And then in the last few years, because of the energy transition and the need for a lot of these critical minerals like copper and lithium and cobalt, we're seeing a new push by different, players to source these raw materials from Africa, which many countries are endowed with. For Europe, particularly, it's also because they don't have as much of those, raw material resources, and they're pushing a strategy that allows them to diversify their supply chains away from China and a few other places.
And there have been a lot of accusations, haven't there, particularly of China, I would suggest, of people accusing China of just exploiting African countries.
Yeah, some conversations and accusations like that indeed have happened. If you look at European history and European relations in Africa going back to the colonial times, you see similar element of exploitation also taking place. But particularly for African countries, the imperative now really is that they want to obtain a much bigger share of their mineral resource wealth. And therefore, the push now is not just to export these raw materials in their own ore form, but rather add value to them. So, for example, building up factories that would produce the cells that are needed to make electric vehicles and manufacture other components within Africa for use in Africa and for export.
So it's quite rightly African countries realising that they have the power, actually, to decide who they do business with and how they do business as well.
Yes, very much so. And that has been the trend that we're likely to see going forward in terms of African countries asserting more and more of their agency. And related to that, in the case of these critical minerals, many of them are already imposing export bans. So basically, saying that it's no longer going to be okay for a country, a company, wherever they're coming from, it could be China, it could be Europe, to export that raw material outside of their country without that value addition. And this is something that we're likely to see a lot more of going forward into the future. And it then raises the question or the issue about how Europe and other players can partner African countries to drive this industrialization and friendshoring agenda.
Yeah, you said value addition there. What do you actually mean by that? What should countries be doing, and what does Africa want countries to do?
Okay, so what Africa wants countries to do is to build up the factories or the plants that would process the raw material. So you take, for example, say copper or lithium. You would mine it, and then you have to use a number of processes to turn it into components or cells that you can use to make the batteries that would power your electric vehicle. What's happened is that historically, the minerals are taken out, and that critical part of the value chain, the middle and the upstream, the downstream bit is missing. So what African countries are looking for now is pushing increasingly for those factories that will make the battery cells, the factories that will make the wind turbines, the factories that will make the solar foot PVs to be located in Africa and manufacture for Africa, as well as for export to other places.
And the foreign countries seem to be receptive to that idea, or are they just having to?
Yeah, a number of countries, we've seen a bit of a change in the tone. It's still not fully there yet in terms of countries being receptive to the idea. But clearly, we're seeing investments coming through to a number of African countries that are pushing this very idea of in-country local value addition. And then also what we're seeing is that a number of African countries now are also partnering together using the corridors approach. So, for example, you can mine copper in the Democratic Republic of Congo and transport it across the border to Zambia for it to be processed and for that value addition to take place. And again, we're seeing much more of a bigger push towards this regional approach to value addition and industrialization, and also the Europe and America supporting this value addition initiative. A very good example of that is with the Lobito Corridor project.
Yeah, explain to us what that is briefly.
Yeah, so this is a big project that spans 3 countries. So Zambia, DRC, and Angola. And the idea is to build almost a 600-kilometer railway line that would move mineral resources and other economic goods along that corridor, including building plants that would turn those mineral resources into a value additive product. And the idea is that you would get those minerals, add the value like I indicated, and then take them via the railway line all the way to the port of Lobito in Angola.
So amid all of this, then, do you think Europe has been left behind a little bit over the last few years, and what can it do to catch up, if you like?
Yeah, I think to an extent, if you look at the data in terms of where the mineral processing takes place, it's largely dominated by China. The Chinese, to an extent, were a bit early to this game and started investing in the technologies and the associated products than Europe and even to an extent, America. But that's not lost on the Europeans. And what you see now through the partnerships that they're signing with African countries and other places is really to try and recoup a bit of that. So specifically in the case of Africa, as I argue in the paper, Africa does offer a number of competitive advantages as a partner of choice, but a partnership that is mutually benefiting for both players. And number one, in terms of the resources that are available, these critical minerals, but also in terms of journey or supply times to Europe. But importantly for Europeans also, Africa need the financing and the additional resources that are needed to unlock the value in these minerals, from both mining them to processing them and then creating the value-added product. And I think Europe can do and is doing part of that in terms of trying to distinguish itself as a partner of choice for Africa. And then related to that, also pushing a number of the stricter environmental, social governance principles, in contrast to what we've seen from other sort of geopolitical rivals.
Well, let's hope your words make a difference. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. That's Theo Acheampong. He's an economics consultant and political risk analyst, a senior visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks very much.